Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq, with daily insight on the Nasdaq-100 index, or the NDX, which is made up of 100 of the largest domestic and international non-financial innovative companies listed on Nasdaq. The NDX has been the barometer for U.S. large cap growth and also one of the best performing indexes over the last decade and a half, not to mention one of the most liquid index ecosystems in the world. Joining us this Tuesday afternoon, we have Shawn, Cruz, Manager of Trader Services at TD Ameritrade, to discuss Nasdaq-100 performance, trends in the Nasdaq Volatility Index. We'll also take a look at Nasdaq futures as well as preview earnings in ADI. Shawn, it's great to see you as always. Welcome back to Trade Talks. And let's kick it off at some fresh levels in the Nasdaq-100.
Yeah, so actually this week, usually I'm just looking at some support levels when we're chopping around a little bit to keep an eye on. But actually today, I'm keeping an eye on now this 20-day moving average. It looks like we pulled back and broke below that. Now we have touched down towards that level, but we're able to finish above that 20-day moving average. So today I am going to be eyeing to see where we close. If we close just below that, if we're able to find a way to close above that. It's also worth noting that the RSI, the relative strength indicator, isn't really falling apart here, but it has been trending downward a little bit. So there's a lot of things that I am going to be watching here over the next couple of days to get a good feel for exactly where the Nasdaq-100 may be heading. I think it's worth noting that we have been seeing on some of the charts lower lows being made, and that's usually the indication of maybe the start of a slight downtrend. But I don't know that there's really anything to me that would indicate this is going to completely drop out of the sky. I think I'm more just watching some of this choppiness and then seeing if we can maybe just trade around this 20-day moving average or around these price levels we're at right now.
And Shawn, any clues that you're getting from the Nasdaq Volatility Index, or what we call Vol-Q, or anything that you're seeing in the futures market that could indicate some chop?
Yeah, so I'm looking right now. I am keeping an eye on Vol-Q. We got down to some incredibly low levels, and I think looking at some of the price movements we had last week just across equities, it makes sense. You saw a lot of those measures of uncertainty or expectations for volatility drop down a little bit, but we did get a little bit of a pop higher here, but we're still down at some relatively low levels. And whenever we are here, although we are off of lower, that measure of volatility that we like to follow, it's nothing even close to me indicating that there is significant fear or concern building in the market. The other thing that I like to keep an eye on every now and then, and that is just looking at volumes and seeing what levels we're getting volumes coming off at, where volume is starting to cluster. And right now, a lot of the volume, just look back over the past 20 days or so, a lot of this volume is sitting right between the 14,930 level and the 15,125 level. And it is a significant amount of that volume that we're seeing here. To me, this actually, one, sort of reaffirms what we're seeing in Vol-Q, that it is fairly low, because we are really just consolidating here in a pretty tight range and chopping back and forth. There's a lot of volume that's coming in here. The fact that you start to see volume trail off in the futures market probably will sort of transfer over to a lot of the equity markets as well. But that is, as you start to maybe get down towards the lower end of some of these ranges, sellers get a little bit exhausted here. And to me, that's why I just don't see any major fear building up that there is a massive sell-off coming. It's just not seeing that strong selling pressure. This is more of choppy price action that I would expect when we are consolidating up here around some of these elevated levels.
And Shawn, to wrap up here, let's get a preview of ADI earnings.
Yeah, ADI is going to be a real interesting report to watch. We've heard from a lot of the other chip makers so far, but there's still plenty more to come that I think is worth keeping an eye on. They have the deal with Maxim rated out there that I think a lot of people are going to want to hear about. But just looking across the business, there's actually some really good tidbits that you'll probably take about what's going on in a lot of various industries based off what ADI says, because so many of their customer base spans quite a few industries. So right now we're looking at about 158 to 170 on the adjusted earnings per share. Revenue is expected to come in around 1.7 billion. It's looking like the industrial segment is going to be really interesting to watch. That's the bulk of where they get a lot of their revenue from, but they also get some revenue in communications, which has 5G implications, automotive, which I don't think I need to remind everyone what's going on with the chip shortage and the impact on automakers, and then also the consumer revenue segment. So I think there's a lot here that can be taken from what we see in their report and what management has to say of what they're seeing in their end markets and what they're hearing from their customers. So looking at that, it looks like there's about a $10 range that they're expected to trade in, and that gets down to 161 or up to 171. The options market's pricing in about a $5 range for analog to trade in coming out of earnings in either direction. I think a lot of it will come down to profitability. The estimate for margin right now is around 71%. So I think it's going to come down to just hitting that revenue number, then also able to maintain or maybe even beat that profitability number, because expectations are pretty high for a lot of these chip makers. So we'll be interested to see how the market digests whatever news we get out when they report earnings tomorrow morning.
All right, Shawn, we appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.